What would you do if someone from the future told you everything was about to change? That there would be a disagreement, and the most important person in this upcoming conflict is you. The conflict won't be one of guns and explosions, but of hearts and minds. A mental tug-of-war in which the future of the Star Trek franchise hangs dangerously over a chasm and is in peril of being lost forever. Intrigued? You should be, because what we are about to tell you will change everything you know about today's Star Trek franchise, and more importantly, where it is going in the future. The key to that future is Star Trek Picard Season 3, and the person holding the key is you. Well, we didn't come from the future, but I guess you can say the future came to us. That's right, around the time you were sitting down for your Thanksgiving meal, we were sitting down to watch all 10 episodes of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And because we were seeing something you could only see in the future, then it's a little like time travel, isn't it? What we saw, you are just now experiencing. And for thousands of fans of legacy Star Trek, Picard Season 3 is going to change everything you think and feel about current Star Trek. If you love Star Trek the way we do, not only will you love it, but you may agree with us that it's the best season of Star Trek in 25 years. Let me qualify this by saying we've been fans and advocates of Star Trek for more than 40 years now. And if you are familiar with our content, then it's no surprise that we have not enjoyed most live-action Star Trek since Discovery aired on September 19th, 2017. Not that we haven't been eternally optimistic that the next thing we watched would be good, because we have. Like the hopeful, positive future outlook that legacy Star Trek has given us, so too do we hope every new Star Trek show will be good. Because why are we here after all, if not to enjoy good new Star Trek? And while we have been heavily critical of 4 seasons of Star Trek Discovery, 2 seasons of Picard, and are on the fence with Strange New Worlds,
I've had a good life.
Why, Hammer? Why? We do understand that despite how we feel, there are many Star Trek fans who love these shows, and to them we say, fantastic, how lucky you are. We have not been so fortunate. You see, there is a feeling we had watching the original series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and for the most part Enterprise. It was an inspiration, a feeling of hope, and even though they were just TV shows, there was a sense that the future of humanity was one that could work together and shed our petty differences. But when Star Trek came back to television after more than 14 years, the core, the heart and soul of what Star Trek is to us was missing. Let's be clear, no one sets out to make a bad TV show. And for many fans, these new shows still speak to them. And as Picard Season 3 showrunner Terry Matalas recently said, there can and should be many kinds of Trek. With 5 or more Star Trek shows now streaming all in the same year, there is room for everyone to watch Star Trek they enjoy. But up until now, for us and many more Star Trek fans than Paramount Plus or Star Trek content head Alex Kurtzman realize, we have not been blessed with the joy that a return of Star Trek should have brought with it. And contrary to studio belief, it's not just a few disgruntled YouTubers and Twitter trolls hiding in the shadows. In a poll taken on the sci-fi subreddit, which includes an excellent cross-section of all types of Star Trek fans, they were asked whether they thought current Star Trek was good, whether they hoped it would get better, or whether it was bad and wouldn't watch it. 29% of respondents said they thought new Trek was good. 29% said they hoped it would get better, but 41% said it was bad and wouldn't watch it. That's 71% of people polled who believe Star Trek isn't good enough. So what's the point? The point is, all of that is about to change. Let's get back to the future for a moment. Remember when we said you were sitting down for Thanksgiving meal and we were sitting down to watch Season 3 of Picard? Well, something interesting happened. Skeptical beyond anything you could imagine, we'd already felt like we'd been rug pulled twice after Picard seasons 1 and 2, so we weren't optimistic about season 3. But when the title card and music started to play, something was different. The music, combined with the visuals, moved something familiar inside, a longing to return to something cherished. It was the first of what would end up being many emotional moments while watching 10 episodes of what is essentially the final Star Trek The Next Generation movie. We laughed and we wept, and we gripped the arms of our seats as what we slowly began to realize was a return of something we loved. Something we frankly felt had been lost forever. Yes, it was the characters we'd always loved, but somehow they had more depth, understanding, and feeling than they'd had in more than 20 years. But even more important was the realization that as each episode began to unfold before us, it was the heart of Star Trek that had returned. And it was at that moment that we realized you can't share the heart of Star Trek with other people if you don't understand it yourself first. This light bulb moment suddenly made everything clear. The answer is Terry Matalas. Before we tell you why the answer is Terry Matalas and what this has to do with you specifically, please help us keep this channel going by listening to a quick message about this video's sponsor, Incogni. While fighting for good Star Trek and keeping pop culture honest, it's important for us that we protect our private information from people trying to take advantage of us. And that's why we use Incogni. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf to get your data removed from collection sites. Every year, the number of data breaches worldwide are rising. There were 68% more breaches in 2021 for identity theft than the year before, which means the likelihood of your data being breached is constantly increasing too. You have the right to keep your personal information from being sold online, and in 3 easy steps, Incogni is going to help you do it. All you have to do is create an account, give them permission to go out and fight for you, and then kick back while Incogni does all the work. From social security numbers, phone numbers, home addresses, and even shopping history, Incogni will relentlessly hunt down data brokers who aggregate your personal information and sell it to unknown businesses that use it for their own purposes. When we realized it would take years to do this on our own, we let Incogni's automated system take care of it for us. Try Incogni 30 days free. The first 100 people to use our code POPCAST in the link in the description below will get 20% off Incogni. Try Incogni and take back control of your personal information today.
And it is uplifting, and it makes me very proud to be part of this family for that reason.
If you haven't figured it out yet, we absolutely loved Picard Season 3. And if you are a fan of Rick Berman-era Star Trek, then we think you are going to love it too. We think it's the best season of Star Trek since Season 5 of Voyager. And this shouldn't be too big of a surprise when you learn that Matalas worked on Voyager as an assistant to Brannon Braga. In fact, he also worked on DS9 and Enterprise. Before anything else, Terry Matalas was a fan of Star Trek. In his final year at Emerson College, he faxed the studio dozens of times in an attempt to get into the Star Trek intern program. The guy who made what is considered the best time travel TV show of all time in 12 Monkeys got his start on Star Trek as a big nerdy Star Trek fan. And it was that big nerdy Star Trek fan who made Picard Season 3. The reason this season feels like a return to the legacy Star Trek we loved is because that's exactly what it is. Terry and his writing team asked themselves one simple question. As a fan, what Star Trek TV show do I want to see?
What is it like to see Geordi as a father? Where is Beverly Crusher out there? All those questions. So much time has passed. How have they grown? How have they stayed the same? Worf. We could go on forever for Worf.
It's amazing how simple of an idea that is. Chris Pine said it when reporters asked him about what type of Star Trek movies Paramount should be making. He said they should make the movies fans want to watch. When you think about it, it's the only right answer. As a studio, you make it for the fans because they're the ones who will pay to see it. As an executive, showrunner, actor, you want fans to love it so they'll keep watching it, so you can keep getting paid to do what you do. But everyone involved in making new Star Trek made a huge mistake. They made an assumption. They justified not having to make Star Trek for longtime fans because they assumed that they would show up to watch it anyways. Take a look at Jason Isaacs, bragging that he doesn't care about die-hard Star Trek fans because they're going to watch it anyways. Now, Jason wasn't a big Star Trek guy, so was he just reiterating what he'd heard from everyone else making Star Trek? They essentially took the fans for granted and made Star Trek for a new generation of potential potential Star Trek fans, laughing and believing the rest of us would just show up anyways. And we did, at first. But when it became obvious that Discovery was going to plot its own course across Star Trek canon, replacing Starfleet ideals and hope with a bleak look at the future that failed to respect what had come before, those longtime fans stopped watching.
You're dismissed.
Right, but
This is the end of the conversation.
Captain, if I could.
You can't.
Right, but I had this as
The conversation's over.
And when Picard was announced, they came out of the woodwork again, a small shard of hope clinging to their Star Trek hearts. And when Picard also delivered a gritty, bleak future without hope and a version of Picard that seemed more like Patrick Stewart than Jean-Luc, many fans went away vowing they would never be fooled again. Many of those fans have completely given up on Star Trek, and they believe the only way Star Trek can continue for them is to burn the whole thing down and start over again. They will not be happy until Secret Hideout and Alex Kurtzman are no longer in the picture, and they are so bitter that even if there is good new Star Trek, they refuse to support it because they believe that it is as good as saying we want Alex Kurtzman to keep making Star Trek. And so, just as the poll showed from before, Star Trek has been broken into three groups: those that love new Star Trek, those that hope it will get better in the future, and those who won't support it until there is a regime change. This is the conflict we've come to warn you about and hopefully prepare you for. For the more than 70% of Star Trek fans who have only wanted good Star Trek that embraces the legacy characters and stories that have come from before, then this message is for you. Star Trek Picard Season 3 is like getting an 8th season of The Next Generation, only we get to see the characters 29 years later. And even if you are totally against Star Trek right now, if you love TNG, Voyager, and DS9, then chances are you are going to love this as well. And for those of you that say you are not going to support Picard Season 3, even if it is good, because you don't want to reward the studio and Secret Hideout because of what they have done from before, you very well could be the reason Star Trek as we know it and love it is gone forever. With all due respect, neither the studio executives nor Alex Kurtzman understand Star Trek. Kurtzman admitted to not being a Star Trek fan growing up, but that since working on the 2009 movies, have developed a deep appreciation for the franchise. Perhaps that's the case, but he doesn't understand what makes Star Trek a quasi-sci-fi religion with many fans. The secret to the success of Star Trek is the vision of Gene Roddenberry and the bravery of one man, Rick Berman. Star Trek has a strange philosophy unlike any other science fiction franchise. It's based on the idea that in the future, human beings are united in purpose and have risen above inner fighting and conflict amongst each other. Starfleet personnel don't even have money. They work for the good of the Federation and their own personal accomplishments. Crazy sounding, right? But as crazy as it sounded, people gravitated to this future where your character, morals, and hard work were all that were needed in the future. When Gene agreed to do The Next Generation, he brought on a young executive named Rick Berman because he wanted someone who didn't have ties to the original series. If Roddenberry didn't want someone tied to the original series, he chose well because Berman hadn't even seen the original Star Trek. He was a documentary filmmaker who found himself working at Paramount, and suddenly he was at the side of the creator of Star Trek. Not a writer, Berman found himself learning from Roddenberry, and when every story would come across his desk, he started giving notes and helping to improve the stories. When Gene passed away and Berman officially took over in the 3rd season, the most important thing for the legacy of Star Trek happened. What was that historical important thing? Nothing. That's right, when Roddenberry died, Berman did something almost no one does. He did nothing. He didn't change Star Trek to fit an image he thought it should be. He didn't try to make it his Star Trek. He did things the way Gene wanted it done. And for 624 hours and 4 movies that Berman was a part of, he would ensure Roddenberry's vision was followed, often to the chagrin of showrunners who had different ideas of how Star Trek should be made. Yes, we're looking at you, Ira Behr. The Deep Space Nine, so beloved by Star Trek fans, may have been a much different show if Berman hadn't kept him reined in. The showrunner wanted to end DS9 as a dream in Benjamin Sisko's alter ego's head. To Berman, we say thank you. And while not free of mistakes, he made his own with the finale of Enterprise ending in a Riker holoprogram. The truth is, Berman did something very few people would have done. Perhaps it's good that Berman wasn't a Star Trek fan, because he may have had his own ideas of what Star Trek should be instead of maintaining Roddenberry's vision. Berman kept Roddenberry Trek alive, and that's why for most of us, all of the Star Trek at that time feels like it has the same ideals, the same principles, and the same tone. Fast forward to new Star Trek and Brian Fuller. Fuller was a huge Star Trek fan and a prolific writer on Star Trek Voyager, but there was only one problem. He didn't want to be on Voyager. He wanted to be on the more liberal DS9 show, where the writer's room had different ideas from Roddenberry on what Trek should be. Fuller applied politics to Star Trek by saying conservatives love Star Trek because of the quasi-fascist military regime, where liberals love inclusivity and hope for the future that we're all going to get along. Perhaps Fuller didn't watch TOS and TNG closely enough because we don't remember a fascist military regime. Everything was just Star Trek, and everybody was on the same page. Regardless, this is the guy who talked the studio executives that own Star Trek into letting him create the new shows. And create Star Trek in the image he wanted is exactly what he did. Make a note here. Berman continued Roddenberry's ideals while Fuller created Trek in the image he thought it should be. When Kurtzman had to take over because Fuller was let go, Kurtzman not being a fan of Star Trek and not understanding that the success of Star Trek stems from the vision and ideals of Roddenberry, continued with most of the things Fuller wanted to do, and then rounded them out with things he thought would make good Star Trek. Ask yourself why Star Trek Prodigy, up until Picard Season 3, was probably the best Star Trek show being made. That's right, it upholds the ideals and heart of Starfleet, with Admiral Janeway reminding and teaching us what the Federation is supposed to be all about.
I've seen my share of wayward crews, and I can tell you this. You've got potential.
Kurtzman hires a bunch of showrunners who all have done a myriad of projects, some good and some bad, but none anything like Star Trek. Instead of providing a vision, Kurtzman hands off the shows to his showrunners and lets them take it in the direction they want to go. Not a bad idea for creativity, but not a good idea for Star Trek. Now 3 times removed from Roddenberry, these showrunners, Michelle Paradise, Akiva Goldsman, and Michael Chabon, want to make good Star Trek, but they make it the way they think good Star Trek should be made.
You don't know what you're doing.
Adam Sandler?
Yeah, that's right.
With their ideals and thoughts, perhaps believing the show was only about seeking out new life and new civilizations, and boldly going where no one has gone before. They didn't know that what makes Star Trek great, besides really good writing, is that we love the characters because they uphold the ideals of Starfleet, not just within themselves, but amongst each other as well. Over and over again, they turned Starfleet into the enemy. They tried to mirror today's society and reflect it in their Star Trek episodes, as opposed to holding on to that vision of a utopian future. But that's not very exciting, is it? Writing for Roddenberry Trek forces you to keep the handcuffs on. How interesting can Star Trek be if there's no infighting and animosity amongst the crew? If we wanted that, we'd watch Battlestar Galactica.
Never felt better in my life.
But we want the original series, The Next Generation, Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Enterprise, where in the end, no matter what happened, those crews had each other's backs. And the fight was against whoever was coming at the Federation, instead of who was trying to destroy it from the inside. And this is what leads us to Star Trek Picard Season 3 and Terry Matalas. We've seen the future, and for at least this one season, the legacy that Roddenberry created and Berman championed is alive and well again in what Terry Matalas has created. Matalas didn't make Star Trek the way he thought it should be done. He made it the way it was done when he was a fan. When he was that young man coming out of college and praying that someone at the studio would make his dreams come true. The truth is, Matalas understands the recipe of Star Trek. And as of this very moment, at the beginning of Picard Season 3, Matalas has not been offered to make more Star Trek in the future. That's right, even though he is fantastic, there are no plans for him to make more new Star Trek. So that's where you come in. If you have been less than satisfied with the current state of Star Trek, but would like to enjoy Star Trek again in the future, we will have a very small window of opportunity to effect change on the future of Star Trek. If you end up loving Picard Season 3 as much as we think you will, it will be up to you and the rest of us to make some noise and let Kurtzman know that this is the Trek we want moving forward. We have to do this. Remember, he doesn't understand what makes Star Trek great.
Explain.
as you would a child.
He's just trying to get shows made on time and on budget to keep his bosses happy. And since his bosses also don't understand what is good Star Trek, even if they did let Kurtzman go, they are just going to hire the next good-looking resume to come in and keep people subscribed to their platform. They didn't know what good Star Trek was when Roddenberry was making it, when Berman was making it, and they surely don't know it with Kurtzman making it. Besides perhaps Brannon Braga, who most recently worked on the Orville and hasn't shown an interest in coming back to Trek, Terry Matalas is the only qualified person willing and able to continue Star Trek into the future. As you will see, he's already set us up with a ready-made show to continue after Picard.
And certainly we've left the door open in ways I can't spoil for more to stay in this timeline and see more of these characters.
Now we just need to let Kurtzman know we want it. And just like he did with Captain Pike in Strange New Worlds, if the fans ask for it loudly enough, he is willing to make it happen. This may be our one and only chance to show the people in charge of Star Trek what we want Star Trek to be moving forward. When we talk about the past, they close their eyes and ears and say, times have changed. What Matalas has proven with Picard Season 3 is that what was old and good can be done today, and it can be done well. It can be something for Paramount and Kurtzman to be proud of, and it can finally be something that the entire fandom, both new and old, can embrace together. This doesn't mean Discovery, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Prodigy can't keep making Trek and allow the people who enjoy that to keep enjoying it. But with Picard ending, there is room for another show. And as you will see, if the show doesn't continue in the time and with the characters at the end of the show, it would be a travesty. And if we lose Terry Matalas to something else, we will be losing the only person truly capable of giving us more of what made Star Trek great in the first place. And if that happens, it very well could be gone forever. Help us shine a light in the darkness for the executives over at Star Trek who haven't realized more Terry Trek is what we want to see in the future. Join us over at terrytrek.com and sign the petition if you want Terry Matalas to keep making more Star Trek. What do you think? Can you let the past go and be willing to focus on the future? Do you want more great Star Trek in the future? Let's talk about it in the comments below. We also hope you enjoy Picard Season 3 and come back every week as we'll be breaking down every episode and going through every fine point in detail. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to hear more discussions about this topic and others just like it, please join us over at our other channel, the Popcast Unleashed. And also please consider supporting our channel and get your own Terry Trek hat or apparel. Proceeds will be used to spread the word that we want more Star Trek led by Terry Matalas. Get 20% off your purchase by using coupon code The Popcast. The link is in the description below.
This is the end, my friend.